Hey, in this video, I go over 5 different things that you can do to shape or modify text in Photopea. In this assignment, I list out 5 different requirements for this particular assignment, shaping, modifying text. So I want to just quickly go through what these things look like. So I'm going to start with a new document, which is, we'll call this shaping text. And I'll make it 8.5 by 11 inches, 300 dpi. I'm going to add a little text to this with the text tool. I'm going to type the word warp and select that text and make it larger this way. I can also type a value straight into the text box. I want to find a font that looks good. Remember that you can kind of filter your fonts over here. Alright, so I'll try something like that. If I want to make the font bigger, I can also use this move tool, transform controls, and size the text up that way. So the first was going in to warp the text, and so you need to be on the type tool, and then you see this little button up here that says warp. Click on warp and then go into style. You can experiment with some of these different styles here and change the bend, change the horizontal distortion. You can change vertical distortion as well. When you got something that you like, say OK. Okay, so I'm going to, so that was one step. That was right here. Number 2, use 1 to 4 word shapes created by using warp options. And then it says in Photopea, select the text tool and click the warp button on the tool menu. So the next one I'm going to show you layering text. So I'm going to pick a color for this, make that red. And I'm going to layer it, I'm going to duplicate the layer. So I go up to Layer, Duplicate Layer, make a copy here. I'm going to change the color of this one. Find another color. And then I can set these layers on top of each other, kind of creating a bit of a drop shadow kind of look to it. All right, find a good arrangement that I like. If I want to move these things together, I can, use the marquee tool to select both layers, or select both layers over there, and then go to Layer and then group those layers. But before I do that, I'm going to make a copy here. So I'm going to go Layer, Duplicate Layer, make a copy of that one. I might do that again, Layer, Duplicate Layer. Just give myself a couple copies here that I can work with. Okay, so back to this list, it said to layer the text for at least 1 word, right, which is what I just did there. So number 1 is word shape should be created by creating outlines from the text and then using the direct selection tool to modify the shape by changing vectors. Number 3 is using a gradient fill. And then number 5 is using a mask. And all of those 3 steps all require this text to be turned into a shape. So in order to do that, I'm going to right-click on the text layer, which if I'm using a trackpad is 2 fingers there. And I'm going to go to Convert to Shape. So I convert that to a shape. You can see I get a little blue outline. Although the text is blue, there's a tiny little blue outline around the outside. And then if I go to my pen tool, you'll see I get all the shape controls up here at the top. So if I want to change this a little bit, I could go to the direct selection tool, click on that, and then I can find these vector points that are here. Of course, there's quite a few. Some of them, depending on the font that you use, sometimes there's not as many. But if I click on one of these, I can zoom in and I can stretch out and I can change the shape. That's here, just by hand. Sometimes you're going in, usually you're going in with something like this and you're making just a little minor adjustment to text. maybe because you're doing something with a logo and there's something about a letter that you need to have changed a little bit here. But it's just good to know that you can turn text into a shape that you can edit. So I'm playing around with those handles. Now if I use the, I go back to the pen tool and I click right on the vector point, it will also take out vectors. So sometimes it makes it a little easier to actually go in and just take out points if it's too difficult to go in and change everything. All right, so I made a couple of changes there. That was number one, create outlines, and then using direct selection tool, modify the shape by changing the vectors. I did this one already, which was using the warp options. Now we're going to use a gradient fill for at least one of the words. So I'm going to take this one down here, which is not a text shape yet. So I'm going to right-click it and convert it to a shape. And then once I've done that, I go to the pen tool, I get the same options that I would have for normal shapes, which include gradients. So in Photopea, you can't go in and give a gradient to something that's just text. It's only to the shapes there. So I go to fill, and then I click on the gradient button. So now I've got a gradient. And if I want to modify this gradient, I can click on that little down arrow. It gives me some options that are there. So I could choose something like that, or I could double click on it and actually go in by hand here and change the colors on my own. So I can go in and make these kinds of changes. I could say OK. I can also go in. I can go with radial pattern or angled or reflect. So I can mess with some of this stuff too. Play with the scale. Move things off to the left, off to the right. All right, so that was doing a gradient. So we layer the type, we adjust it, well, we warped it, we layered it, we changed some of the outlines, gave it a gradient, and now the last thing is to do a mask. So I'm going to find a picture, look for paint swirl. Actually, probably a little easier to do this in Illustrator than it is to do it in Photopea, but there is a way to do it. So if I find, an effect, and then I'm going to bring this into Photopea. And I'm actually going to put this behind this one that I did, the one that I changed the shape of it a little bit. So I'm going to make sure that that's on top of the other one. So this one, this copy, bring that on top. Okay, so I'm going to take this area, this particular one, the text shape that's there. I'm going to go to Paths, and I'm going to click on this down here, this selection button, which is going to turn that whole path into a selection. So I'm just going to step back and show you how I do that again. First, I put the picture behind the text, brought the text out front. I'm on this copy, this shape of the warp text, and then I go to Paths, and I click on the selection button, which makes a selection from it. And then I go back to layers, and this time I got to go to the photo that I want to mask, which is this paint swirl. And I'm going to click on the masking button, which is down here, the rectangle with the hole cut out in it. So I click on that. It's there, it's just covered up by the thing that was in front. So if I hide the text that was in front, I'll see the masked image from below. All right, and that's it. Going through the list, we use the direct selection tool to modify a shape. I use the warp options to warp one of the shapes. I used a gradient fill. I layered text, and I used masking for at least one of the words. And that's it.